Hi, okay. So you have planned the essay, you've written it, you've attended to your structure, you've edited it, and just before you submit it, there are a few things that you need to do. So this fourth video is just called the checklist, okay? So I'm just asking you to check on a number of different things before you submit that final essay. So there are a number of questions basically that you need to ask yourself, and the reason why is because you want to make sure that what you're submitting is a coherent document. Okay, so what I want you to do is to think about these ideas as we go. I'm going to also give you these notes in a format that you can just read through, that you don't actually have to listen to me going on the whole time, so that hopefully you can use them, click through them fairly quickly before you submit. Okay, so the first one is the introduction checklist. So think about the first sentence of your entire essay. Does it refer to something to do with the essay title? Okay, now maybe it might have something to do with it in a kind of a contextual way, or offering some kind of background. So it doesn't have to contain the words that it contains in the essay title or anything like that, but is there an idea that is directly connected to the essay title? Does it give us some information about that essay title? Okay, so that first sentence is important. Remember, it's the first thing we're going to see, so you need to get it right. The next few sentences of the introduction, do they establish the context or the importance of the issue at hand that you're going to discuss in the essay? They should do. Okay, that's their job. The essay needs to then give us a sense of what you're going to talk about. So as I said, there might just be, 3 or 4 things that you want to cover in the essay, and they need to appear here in the introduction. There are no surprises in an essay. Like this isn't a short story that you're writing. There's no twist in the tale. There's no surprise ending. So we need to foreground what you're about to talk about, and that needs to happen in the introduction. And then the most important sentence probably of the whole introduction is your thesis sentence, which comes at the end of your introduction. So is this thesis sentence setting out your argument or the question that you are going to cover? Don't write it in a question format though, write it in a statement. Okay, so it can be as simple as this essay will argue that, but it needs to lay out what you're going to discuss. Okay, in terms of the body paragraphs, then think too whether each body paragraph has a topic sentence. One thing that I've done with certain groups is to get them to look at the first sentence of each of their body paragraphs and then compare it, or not compare it, but connect it to their thesis sentence, which is the final sentence of their introduction. And if your essay is coherent and cohesive, then there should be a nice clear link between that last sentence of the introduction, the thesis sentence, and the first sentence of every other paragraph. So that is kind of how you know that your sentence is creating a nice structure for the reader to follow. So the first sentence of each body paragraph should make a connection back to that thesis sentence. It should also establish a link with the previous paragraph's content. Okay, so you need to use transitions here, and by those transitions it might just be another way in which the author does this or it might be it is also important to consider, or in addition to thinking about X, we must also examine Y and tell us because. And that linkage is really important. You can't create something that's really cohesive unless things link together. Also, your topic sentence needs to suggest what the paragraph is actually going to be about. All right, so as I said, there are no surprises in an academic essay. So keeping it nice and clear, nice and functional, that's what we want to do. In terms of the body paragraphs, then, think about whether the order of the paragraphs makes sense. When we were talking about structure, this is something that I touched upon. So is there a logical reason for the order that you've chosen for your paragraphs? There should be. Okay, it should be something that you've done consciously. And if it isn't, then go back and think about the order of the paragraphs. Do they make sense where they are? Are they also the right length? I've said here, they should be between 150 and 250 words long. So, average, there is about 200 words. As I said before, some are a little bit shorter, some are a little bit longer, depending on your style. And that's no problem, but they should not be any shorter than 150 words, because it's impossible to develop an idea in under 150 words, really. So they need to be long enough for you to establish the key idea of your paragraph. Think about your sources too. Are your sources convincing? Are they helping to prove the point that you're trying to get across? And is there enough balance between your own insights, which don't use I, by the way, but which are kind of critical analyses? Is there enough balance between those and the expert opinions that you're employing? Have you referenced everything that needs to be referenced? So where an idea is not your own, is that clear to the reader? It should be. Okay, otherwise you're in danger of plagiarism, and we do not want that to happen. All right. So if in doubt, reference. You can make it very, very clear when an idea is not your own. If you're, if you have gone through the notes on referencing before, if you've had any kind of instruction in referencing at all, you'll know what to do there. And if not, go to your referencing guidelines and have a close look at those. Are all the sources and direct quotations explained, or have you left them standing on your own? Now, this is a good one. So anytime you use a paraphrase or a direct quote from another source, you need to comment upon them and link them back into your argument. Show us why they're relevant, okay? They shouldn't just be left sitting there in the middle of your paragraph with no connection to anything that's around them. So just make sure that you're explaining yourself all the time. Why is this point important? Why is this, critics or authors' quote significant in the way that you're trying to build your argument? The next one is, has anything that goes off topic or is not essential been cut? Okay, so always remember your word limit, and even if you go below your word limit but you need to cut something, cut it. You'll always end up adding in a few extra bits anyway. So whenever you know you have to cut something but you're finding it hard to do, cut and paste it, oh there goes my phone, into a separate file so that you feel it hasn't been completely lost, right? You'll probably wonder later why you were so attached to it in the first place. Usually we know when something isn't good enough, it needs to be cut, okay? Also, towards the end of each paragraph, have you reminded us why you're saying what you're saying? So have you shown how the point is relevant to your argument? That's what we need to do. We need to be reminded that, this is something that is particularly important. Now, it doesn't mean reiterating the same thing over and over and over again. It might just simply mean saying, this is particularly significant to remember because, and it would be a point that is related to your central argument, but it might not be a situation where you're simply regurgitating the same sentence over and over again. We do not want to do that, okay? And then finally, your conclusion. Okay, so does your conclusion say something different from your introduction? Don't repeat what you've said in your introduction. What we need to do now in the conclusion is to show how your argument has been proved. And that's why I have this picture here. Your conclusion is your mic drop moment. It's where you get to say, look at all the evidence I've presented here. Now it's impossible to refute my argument. It's impossible to refute my position. Okay, so your conclusion needs to revert back to the thesis statement and state how the essay has proved the point that you're making. Okay, so it might be drawing on a particular insight that you've had about a text. If you are a humanities student, you might have revealed something about a text, and that might have formed a really important part of the overall argument that you're making. And so you bring that back into the conclusion and you show that and you reiterate why that's important in a slightly different way to the way that you've said it before. Does it suggest ways in which research might fill knowledge gaps in the future? Okay, now this isn't for everybody, so not everyone will need to do this in their conclusion. If you are, in a more technical or scientific area, then you might need to do this where you will show what research needs to cover in the future. If you're in the humanities, less so, I think. However, you might need to, you might make a statement such as, that a particular area of interest needs to be further developed in relation to an author's work, for example, something maybe that hasn't been highlighted before that could be ripe for exploration for scholars in the future. Your conclusion then, does it leave a good lasting impression or is it wishy-washy? So the conclusion is really important. Remember, it's the last thing that we read of you, and we want you to leave us with a positive impression. Okay, so think about really hammering home your point. We need to be in no doubt about your argument by the time we end, and we need to also be assured that you have enough backup to support that argument. Finally then, does it end with a definitive statement that completes the argument that you've made throughout? Something like, a therefore statement or a hence or a thus statement. And it should answer that question raised in the thesis sentence. Okay, so bring it back to that thesis sentence in order to end. Very often it's difficult to end our essays. We're not quite sure where that should happen. It should happen just as you would end an argument that you might have with a loved one, where you go, and that's the reason why I'm right. I mean, your essay is essentially an argument in a more formal way. And what we want you to do is, therefore, and tell us the reason why all of the evidence that you've been producing the whole way through the essay is significant in answering the question that was raised in your thesis sentence. So I hope those videos are helpful to you. If you've got any questions, my email address is jmoconnor@wit.ie. You can email me about anything that you've seen in these videos, or if you need any further resources, I'd be glad to get them for you.